Welcome to Rebel Therapy Podcast. I am Katie, one of your hosts.
And I am Michelle, your other host. Hey.
Hey. So I am coming to you. This is like a Canadiana theme here from Union Hotel, which is by Union Station, downtown Toronto, which is very fun. And I'm noticing your amazingly Canadian shirt. I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I've been really feeling this shirt lately. I don't know why. It just feels really cozy this time of year.
Because it's been endlessly winter? Maybe that's why.
I want to like, kind of have the energy of like a lumberjack,
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. All right, what are we talking about today, Michelle?
So we're going to talk about the idea of a new type of what people would measure in terms of intelligence that this article is talking about on Psychology Today. So I just want to kind of outline it briefly, and then we'll kind of get into how we think it's relevant to Gestalt and just kind of therapy practice in general.
Okay. And full transparency, I have not read the article, nor have we planned this in advance. So this is like a hot take from me after you give some, background on what we're discussing. That's good. It's going to keep it kind of fresh and spontaneous.
Exactly. So I'm explaining it to you as well as to the people who are listening and watching.
I'm hearing about it for the first time, just like y'all that are listening.
So it's this article on Psychology Today, and the title is Why IQ and EQ Aren't Enough. So the idea that, we have a way to kind of, measure intelligence in terms of, how you think, and then intelligence in terms of like, your ability to read feelings and express feelings and that type of thing. But that there's kind of a missing element to it. And what they're arguing is for like what they would call an AQ, which is like, agility quotient or whatever. But like the idea of kind of flexibility, and that's the type of thing that changes as you go on in your life. Like in terms of IQ and EQ, they tend to be a little bit more stable, although I would argue that you can also build skills to build up your emotional intelligence as well. You already look confused. Do you want to jump in?
No, I'm not confused. No, I'm already like, in disagreement, not surprisingly. But anyway, do finish. I'll keep my thoughts to myself.
Okay, no, I mean, we'll get into it, They're just describing like the agility is like ability to face change, disappointment, and the unknown without losing your footing. And essentially they're saying like there's these 4 skills that you need to develop in order to have that, and they're calling it the ABCs. First one is anchors, so like the idea of people's, places, routines, like it's basically the idea of support in kind of Gestalt terms. Bets, so the idea of taking an action without knowing what the outcome is going to be. And that's also what we've talked about in terms of making something an experiment, right? You're going to make an educated guess, you're going to try something, and you're going to see what happens. Basically, in order to do that, it actually works together with the anchors. Like you need to have the anchor and the support for the stability to be able to make the bet kind of rely on each other. C is classroom. Just the idea of like you basically need to keep learning your whole life, which feels like it's pretty feels like a bit more of a stretch. But the idea of like beginner's mind, like that Buddhist thought of like, you're approaching things with openness, curiosity. Yeah. As if you hadn't done it before, essentially, beginner's mind.
Right.
And then the other one is discomfort. And that's also something we've talked about, the idea that like you're not always going to be comfortable. So the point is to shift your relationship with being uncomfortable. So you're not just like avoiding it at all costs, but like recognizing that it's part of growth. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the summary of the article. So as I got into it a little bit more, your face seemed a little less.
Just to begin, I'm super resistant to all the cheese ball aspects of it and trying to force it into some strange little structure, whatever. That's just my own personal feelings about that. That's fine. I like a lot of what you said, actually. The one thing that I was stuck on at the beginning, and I think that's when you noticed my face changing, was this idea that they're stable or that they can't change or it's something that changes later. I don't agree with that. I don't think that any of these things, whether it's IQ, EQ, or AQ, it doesn't matter. I'd be really curious and interested to see the science behind this assessment that it doesn't shift, because that sort of flies in the face, if I'm being honest, anecdotally, based on my own personal life experiences, but also my professional experiences. And to me, one of the main beliefs that I have as a therapist is that, of course, these things can change. And that, first of all, you have to want to change. And then from there, it is about skill acquisition. So bringing it back to the article, I do like the idea of framing these things as skills. And to me, the whole point behind a skill is that it can be acquired, right? It can be practiced. So the agility piece, I think, is absolutely great. I love the idea of walking into every situation. This is a Gestalt perspective, right? We've talked about before, from the perspective of it being an experiment, right? So that's the beginner's mind, or the curiosity that's innate when you're learning, that kind of idea. What I love about it being an experiment is it sort of ignores this idea of judgment. It makes the idea of self-judgment kind of irrelevant, because how can the result of an experiment be good or bad? That's sort of pointless, right? The idea is that you're looking for a particular outcome because you have a hypothesis, and either you get that outcome or you don't. And if you don't get the outcome, then you try something else. So
Yeah. Yeah,
aspects of that I do
and I
like.
like the idea. I like the idea of holding that loosely, right? Like
Yes.
even scientific study, it's like, yeah, you're trying to prove something, but you're not going to like fudge all of the stuff to try to make it happen, right? It's like you have an idea that you're, I mean, in
That would be
theory,
really bad science, right? As
your
opposed to just
scientific
following.
practice would
Yeah.
not do that, right?
No,
But like
no,
this
no, of course not.
idea of like you're pointing in the direction of something that you want, but then you actually have to take the action or try it out to see what will happen. And like you said, like how can that be good or bad or anything? Like it just is what it is. It makes it a little more like
Sure.
neutral and open and flexible.
Yeah, and I talk to clients all the time about these different things where they're like, "Oh, I don't know, should I do this? Should I do that? I made a mistake. I did this. Maybe that'll be a mistake." I'm like, "What are you talking about mistake? Like life is a series of experiments, because I can, on paper, given the experiences that I've had, make an educated guess about what this new experience may be like, or whether it's a good thing for me or a bad thing, or whether or not I will meet my objectives or whatever. But until I'm actually doing it, I can't know for sure. So good and bad is kind of irrelevant, right? I mean, I try a thing. If it works, maybe I keep going. If it doesn't work, then I regroup and try something else. But either way, it's all learning. It's all learning. And to your point, it is the scientific method, right? And if you try to sort of shoehorn your expectations or the science around your you get my point. That's just terrible science. Terrible science, right? You go where the science takes you. You don't force the science into the hypothesis that you showed up with.
Yeah, totally get it. And you know, I understand like your resistance to kind of like the cutesiness of it. And it's like I always have this like tension in myself because like there's kind of like the part of me that wants everything to like fit in boxes and the organized part of me that's like, you know, we've got like acronyms and, you know, IQ and AQ and then, you know, ABC. And it's just like there's a way to kind of like categorize thoughts, which I can sometimes make it a little bit more digestible for me at least. But in terms of it being like, you know, viewing it as though it's something simple, I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's more just like you're dipping the toe in all of these things and you're trying to give like a frame of reference. And it's, you know, Psychology Today, they have interesting articles, but they're pretty brief. Like they're not going into extremely deep theory. It's kind of just like touching on the subject of something and maybe like offering some way to view something differently.
But you know, if we're going to be really gestalt about this in the moment and have it be here and now and this relational experience that we're having together, I noticed my resistance to the structure and the organization that you're talking about. It doesn't work for me. It never has. That's my own idea of being the reality that I am not a very particularly agreeable person. So that's a personality trait. One of those things is actually pretty stable that doesn't shift over time. We maybe talk about that another time. But also I'm noticing that in real time, I'm taking in this information and I can feel myself sort of going with you in certain ways, resisting you in other ways. On the whole, I like I like what's being said. But if I'm honest, I'm noticing a sense in myself of, and I think we do this generally, stepping into a situation with my own sort of expectations about how this works and what I think it's going to be and what I think makes sense. And then as I take in new information, I have to adjust in real time. You know, you watched my face doing that in real time. But I mean, to me, this is kind of a tiny microcosm of what we're discussing, right? So, I mean, I heard it initially and I was immediately resistant. And that's a lot of my own stuff that I bring to a new experience, which is true for all of us, right? We bring the sum total of our experiences and our strategies and our creative adaptations or whatever. For me, it's skepticism, you know, to our initial experience here. And then if I'm able to hang in with you hear the new information, and then in real time integrate what's happening, I end up being in a different place at the end than I was when I started. And
Yes.
to me, that's kind of what we're talking about, right? So the demonstration of agility, I still have problems with some of what you told me, but mostly on the whole, I've come around to it.
Yeah.
And it didn't take very long, right?
Well,
But
yes.
go ahead.
Well, no, you're hitting on two different things I wanted to talk
Yeah.
about. The first one was like the idea of contact, right? And so like
Yep.
what's supporting that maybe like openness and shift, right, is like the relationship between you and I, the premise
Exactly.
of the podcast, like you're gonna listen to this thing for the first time, you're gonna, have thoughts about it and react and like you said, and shift in real time, but it's like the contact between us is what is allowing that to happen, as well as obviously our own things we're bringing to it.
So we could call that support,
Yeah.
let's say,
Yeah.
right? The support that is existent because I trust you. And also, Psychology Today is a pretty trusted source, I would argue. So there was like a groundwork of support, at least to begin with, right?
Yes, and that's the other thing you're kind of talking about is the idea of like field theory. And it's like
Mhm.
essentially kind of touched on that in terms of like in Gestalt, they talk about field theory a lot in terms of the idea that like we're all an accumulation of the field around us. And that's like, our immediate environment, our history, our personalities, our, mood, the actual moment that's happening right now, and if one thing in that field actually shifts, it shifts the whole kind of, it's almost like an organism in a way, right?
Yes, I
These
love
like
that. Yeah.
tendrils reaching to all of these different like elements that are supporting you as a person.
Yep.
And yeah, so that yeah, you kind of just inherently touched on that, which I think is interesting.
Well, I mean, the third piece that I would articulate, I think, is or touch on is practice. I have a lot of practice learning. And I think that learning is a skill, being curious and following thought, thinking critically, all these things. It doesn't matter what the skill is, but the point is, all of this requires skill and practice and experience, right? So it's not the first time for me that I've sat somewhere with somebody that I care about, hearing a new idea and going, I don't know, let me sit with that for a second, right? I've done that before. And so there's also that sort of inherent trust in my own ability to maintain my own connection with myself and my foundation and my ground so that I have the stability to take in new information and possibly, like just now, kind of reorder the way I was thinking about something, but it doesn't push me off my balance, right? And I think a lot of that comes down to practice because any skill needs to be practiced. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I just got distracted. Give me a second.
Oh.
I can't. Just pause 1 second.
Yeah. So the third point that I was
Oh,
making is that all of the things that you talk about, right?
can we talk about the third point before we go over recap?
Yes, go.
Well, what I was going to say is, as you were talking about, like your ability of practice and skill with learning that allowed you kind of to take on this new information. But I was just saying, like, in a way, you're almost demonstrating, we just demonstrated an experiment that we weren't really intending to do, right? But the idea of like, I'm going to present this thing, you're going to be like open to it and thinking about it and then responding. So it's almost like demonstrating the skill that you're talking about.
So the combination of IQ, EQ, and now AQ, we've done it in real time. But okay, having said that, I think you're right. But having said that, what I love about this is that it makes it really explainable potentially to clients. So people come in and they're like, oh, they're stuck, they're lost, they don't know what to do, they don't know what they want. Often it's like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, I can't tell you what to do because, as we've said before, that's not the role of a good therapist. I'm not going to give you the answers, whatever those are. But it's interesting to be able to sort of break it down to, these are sort of the skills that we can work together to acquire and then have it be quite demonstrable, I guess. Yeah.
And having it in kind of like the way they're describing in the article, but just like different buckets, essentially. I think it does make it clearer. And the way that they work together, right? The idea of like support and experiment. that you need both. It's like you need a good foundation to be able to push off of and try something new and have that support.
Yeah. And the other thing I like is that it also, I think, honors the pieces that everybody brings into a therapy session, right? So the initial parts, that I was able to bring in because I have a life of experience and everything, field theory, back to that idea. Everything that I've done and experienced before has come to bear in this moment with you together. So it really is sort of a perfect microcosm of how therapy works.
That's one thing that I think is sometimes underestimated, but does kind of bear out in study after study, is like what proves the success of therapy is the relationship between you and the therapist, that it's actually the relationship that carries it. And so that was kind of another element that just wanted to highlight, was the idea of like contact. Contact isn't just between like you and another person, although I think that's an important part of it. It's like contact even with yourself, with your environment, with the world, all of it. But the idea that that's the container is the relationship, and that's where the work can continue, just like the container of this experiment was you and I in the podcast, and that kind of allowed that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, to restate, the greatest predictor of positive outcomes in therapy is the strength of the relationship. It's not even about the modality or the type of therapy necessarily. And that has been borne out by science over and over again. So, yeah, we got to demonstrate that in real time. Very fun.
Yeah. So I'm curious for listeners, as they were kind of hearing me briefly recap that article, did you go on a similar journey as Katie of being like, what are you talking about? Oh, it's too cutesy. What's with the list? Like, and to kind of being like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, I think I agree with that. An interesting angle.
Yeah. Or are some of our listeners less difficult than I am? Chances are possibly, but we
Well, what's interesting is, I think like you're resistant to like authority, right? And I'm not saying like I'm an authority, but I think sometimes, someone would be like, okay, well, it's a therapist telling me, or it's from a trusted article. Like I'm not going to be as resistant up front. Not that they wouldn't bring any critical eye to bear to it, but it's like, you have that sense of like, just because you say you're an authority, like, are you? Like, I'm going to listen for myself and judge.
That's right. And make my own decisions. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is great. I do tend to attract to my therapy practice many other people who are similar, which I love. I love it. Bring it. Question me on all things. I think it's fantastic. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Michelle, for bringing this article. I thought it was great. And I like the format almost of like, here's a thing that you've never heard before, react, right? We're doing like a reaction in real time. I think we've sort of hit upon something that might be valuable. So I had a good time. I thought it was fun. I'd love to do it again. And if any of our listeners have any opinions on that, please share. And like and subscribe, as always. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.